This is the brand new 3rd generation Apple Watch SE, and this is bold, but this is probably the best Apple Watch for most people. And with the SE3, Apple kept the same $249 price tag while making major improvements, with honestly very few noticeable differences compared to the $400 Series 11. And even the Apple Watch Ultra 3, which is triple the price at $800. Seriously, there used to be a big difference between the SE and the flagship watches, but the differences seem to be less significant this year. They all have the exact same S10 chip inside, the same UI, they're all equally as fast, and the SE even got the same durability upgrade as the Series 11 with stronger glass this year. On top of that, this watch delivers accurate workout tracking, sleep analytics, temperature sensing, and always-on display, finally, GPS, and it even has the option to get 5G connectivity. I'll explain this later in the video, but essentially, the Apple Watch SE is the budget offering of Apple's watch lineup, but I would argue it's the best Apple Watch for most people. Although it looks similar to the previous Apple Watch SE models, the SE3 now has a temperature sensor, always-on display, faster charging, 5G, sleep apnea detection, and more improvements I'll talk about throughout this video. But let's rewind and start off with the design. There are two different sizes available, 40mm and 44. The one I'll be showing in this video is the 40mm one. I think I kind of regret getting the smaller one. It feels a little small on my wrists, but it's nice that this is technically the smallest Apple Watch you can buy. So if you have smaller wrists, maybe older people, children, women, or just any dudes that want smaller watches, the SE is way smaller than the smallest version, obviously the Ultra, but also even of the Series 11. This also comes in two different colors, Starlight or Midnight, and the display finally has an always-on display, so when you're not looking at the watch, it'll still show you the time. You don't have to lift and wait for it to turn on to see what time it is. The bezels are a little bit chunky on here, but I think they would look a lot better on the 44mm version, just because your screen-to-body ratio would be a little bit better there. Like I said, 40mm, still not bad though. The display is more than usable. It's now 4 times more crack resistant than the SE2, which matches the same crack resistance as the Series 11, which was a big upgrade for the Series 11. The body of the watch is aluminum, so it's very lightweight, kind of a nice matte appearance to it, but being aluminum, it's a softer metal, you may be prone to scratches, so if you are not a very careful wearer of the watch, maybe you want to get like some type of case for this or something. Talking about cases and accessories, if you flip it over to the back, the bands are the very standard Apple Watch style, so you can get them on Amazon or really anywhere, just 40mm Apple Watch bands. So you push a little button and you just slide it right off. That's nice for compatibility. On the right side, we have our button. We've got our crown, which is also a button, and you can navigate the UI by spinning it. And we have a microphone in the middle. Of course, I'll get into a test of all of those later in the video, but on the left side, we have a speaker, again, to answer phone calls or have Siri responses. The display is a 1000 nit LTPO display, same resolution, same size as before, slightly less bright than the flagship Series 11, but I actually had no issue seeing this outside in broad daylight. And of course, under the hood, I mentioned it has the same S10 chip on the inside, and now, just like the Series 11, this is getting the option for 5G this year. In the past, it was just LTE. If you're gonna notice a difference or not, I'm not really sure. It depends on where you are, but it's kind of nice you have that improvement in case you really want to use your watch and leave your phone at home, or maybe if it's like an elderly family member that doesn't have an iPhone is wearing the watch, and you're using it for like fall detection, or maybe to track your child who also doesn't have an Apple Watch. 5G may be better for coverage, I guess. Just kind of nice that you have that improvement. This is also 50 meters water resistant, so you can swim with this. And I know I wouldn't recommend technically swimming in saltwater with this, but I have a friend who trained for a half Ironman with an Apple Watch SE, and he swam in the ocean like every day, and his watch was fine. So I'm not saying do it, but it worked for him. As far as what is new on this watch, we've got some improvements, which are pretty significant. Of course, a lot of them are related to that newer chip on here, so media playback through the speakers, not something I ever do, but if you want to listen to a podcast or I don't know, whatever, and like your phone's not around, I guess you could do that. We do have one-handed gestures like double tap, the wrist flick, which comes to all the watches now, of course, so you can wrist flick to go back from Smart Stack or dismiss notifications, stop timers, or like reject calls, for example. So let's start off by taking a look at how the heart rate performs on the Apple Watch SE3 compared to the Polar H10, which is an ECG strap. It's known to be very accurate, and you can see these graphs line up pretty much exactly on the entire walk and run that I did. I did some intervals, which are generally really difficult for watches, and yet this entire workout has an R value of 0.988, which close to 1 is better. And you can see the R squared is 0.976, which is really quite incredible for a watch, especially anywhere near this price tag. And if we actually compare this to several other devices I wore on this workout, you can see we've got the Whoop MG, the Pixel Watch 3, the Garmin Venue 4, all very new top-of-the-line devices. And you can see across the board, like Apple Watch SE 3 did an excellent job having the second highest R and R squared value, only behind the Pixel Watch 3. And you can see it actually beat out the Garmin, especially on the intervals, where the Garmin Venue 4 seemed to kind of lag a little bit. And it also beat out the Whoop MG in a lot of portions of it, especially in the earlier portion, more of a steady state. Sometimes Whoop would just kind of have these weird little bubbles. And you could see the Apple Watch SE just really crushed it in terms of heart rate. So as far as sleep tracking goes, I wore this for quite a while. I have 4 nights of sleep tracking data that I wore this compared to a Whoop MG and a Pixel Watch, and this does a lot. So you do have temperature sensing on your wrist now. That's a new improvement here. There is no blood oxygen tracking, but it does still have sleep apnea notifications, which is a newly added thing. Pretty big because a lot of people do have sleep apnea, and it's nice that this can notify you if it thinks that you might have that. It also has a sleep score now, so the sleep score is based on 3 main factors. So if I just pull up my sleep score from last night, it'll tell you the score, and if you tap on the little information icon on the bottom, you can scroll down and it tells you the 3 things it actually cares about. So you get 50 points for duration if you sleep long enough. You get 30 points for bedtime, going like a consistent bedtime every night. And then the third one would be interruptions. So it's kind of like a really rudimentary, I've kind of mixed feelings about the sleep score. The positive is that it's very, like, it's something you can really control. Like you can say, all right, I'm going to bed at the same time every night. That will improve your sleep score, and that does have a big impact on your sleep. But sometimes it feels a little too rudimentary to me. Like it might be overlooking things like if you eat food too late in the day, if you're exercising at the wrong time or not enough, you have caffeine late in the day, your heart rate variability, CO2 levels in your room. Like there's a lot of other factors that I think could impact your sleep score, and this just has a really basic sleep score. So if you're looking at this chart right here, I have 4 different nights of sleep tracking with the Whoop MG, the Apple Watch, and a Pixel Watch, and I find that the Pixel Watch and the Whoop tend to be like similar enough, and I think the Whoop probably most accurately tracked how I felt, where some nights were definitely not really as good as other nights with how I slept, and they definitely reflected that. Whereas the Apple Watch seem to always be like 95 to 99 for me. As long as I go to bed at the same time and sleep long enough, I tend to not really wake up a lot in the middle of the night. So it just always gives me a really, really good sleep score, which is great. But I feel like there's other factors that impact my sleep and how awake I am the next day. Otherwise, if we're looking at the other things that were tracked, deep sleep always seemed to be the lowest on the Apple Watch. It gave me like 45 to 55 minutes per night, while the other devices were often around 1.5 to 2.5 hours of deep sleep per night. Now, of course, I don't have an EEG or a PSG, so take this all with a grain of salt because there is no reference device that's medically verified. Like, you just can't really buy that as a consumer. If you guys have one you'd recommend, let me know, and I'm glad to try it, but I just wanted to show you compared to other devices. As far as REM goes, these were kind of all over the place, but REM sleep seemed to be somewhat consistent among all of them. The Apple Watch seemed to do a decent job of that, and so that's like sleep tracking. Again, it does a good enough job, but it really, in my opinion, puts a lot of weight on those 3 basic things. It really simplifies your sleep to going to bed at the same time, sleeping for long enough, and not waking up. And for a lot of people, maybe that's all that matters. And by the way, if you're wondering how the Apple Watch Series 11, the Apple Watch Ultra 3, and the Apple Watch SE 3 compare in terms of accuracy, I'm actually working on a big comparison video. And if you like this video, now's a good time to remember to subscribe so you can see when that video comes out. Now, talking a little bit more about the specs and the storage and just basic information about this watch, it has a claimed 18-hour battery life. Definitely not a long battery. It changes if you have always on display on or off. It does finally have fast charging though. That's a really big positive. So you can put it on the charger and it does seem to top off really quickly, especially for the tiny watch right here. It doesn't take long to fill it up in the morning. Like when I'm showering, I just set it on there. But even 15 minutes should allegedly give you 8 hours of use on here. We also have improved storage, now 64 gigabytes instead of 32. If you want to have like a ton of, I don't know, offline maps and photos and songs, probably songs would take up, I guess, some space. Again, whatever. You have a lot of room for storage on this device. Also, the chip, like I said, I kept mentioning this, it's upgraded to the S10 now. The previous SE, I think, had the S8 in it, so definitely a big improvement. Now we also have a 4-core neural engine as well, so more kind of AI-related stuff. Siri should be a little faster, a little better on here. it is still Wi-Fi 4 and Bluetooth 5.3, as well as having the same GPS, GLONASS, all the other satellite systems, but this does not have dual band GPS. To be fair, the Apple Watch Series 11 doesn't either, only the Ultra has it, so that would make that most accurate if it's like, you know, big mountains on either side of you, you're in a canyon, you're in a city with a lot of tall buildings. I'll do a test when I do that comparison and see just how different it really is, but the Apple Watch GPS has always been quite accurate in my opinion, even with just single band like this. Now, tracking the accuracy of a run with the GPS on the Apple Watch SE 3, please excuse the sideways text here. I just recorded my screen horizontally and it didn't rotate all of the text there. But just looking at the map, I want to look for any kind of wandering. So on this trail here, you can see where the trail actually was. There's this little gray area in the middle. It wandered off a little bit whenever there were taller buildings around. So here, it showed me wandering off onto the road a little bit. That didn't actually happen. And then going under a bridge, you kind of wandered a little bit there, lost signal. But otherwise, it pretty much stayed right on the trail for most of this entire exercise. You can see turning right here, it didn't cut the corner. That was actually what I did, but there was a little bit of wander into this building back here. Here's where you see the biggest difficulty for the watch. You can see on Poplar Street, there are two large buildings on either side. That's why I decided to go down here to see this is where dual band GPS would really benefit the watch. Single band GPS, it does struggle with situations like this. And even though I was on, you can see the left side of the street here, it showed me wandering over to the other side and even into the buildings. When we go back to an open space right here, you can see it did an excellent job. This is just a big open field and you can see where the trail was that I was on. I turned on this and that was absolutely perfect. And then I went around a little like helicopter pad down here. So this should be a perfect square. And you can see it is very close to a perfect square. It did a good job on this. Continuing on, I kind of wandered through, again, an open trail down here, and it did an excellent job in open space. And otherwise, it didn't really cut any corners until right here. You can see that was a corner that was slightly cut. Otherwise, yeah, this watch does an excellent job in open space. If there's trees around, that's fine. But if you're in a canyon or if you're in between tall buildings, it is definitely going to struggle without having dual band GPS. We also now have, as I mentioned, media playback on the speaker. You can leave a comment and let me know if you'd ever use that, but let's take a look at the watch. This is now upgraded to WatchOS 26. If you look at the watch face, you can swipe left and right and that'll just change out the different watch faces you have. If you scroll down with the crown, that'll give you notifications. If you press the crown, it shows you all of the apps. And by the way, I would recommend for a small display like this, it might be easier if you go either way down to the bottom and get the list or just go to your settings and make the apps always a list. I think it's just easier to look at than the honeycomb design on a tiny display like this. If you swipe up from the bottom, you get your smart stack. You can also access that by scrolling up on the crown. And this is really what I use most on the watch. So this will just show you like your sleep score, you know, maybe the moon phase, whatever you want. You can customize this stack, put the weather on there, and you can tap into each one. And it's an easier way to just kind of quickly glance at your watch and see everything you need to. Pressing and holding the top button will summon Siri. And let's actually get into a Siri test.
What's the weather in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania?
It's currently clear and 78 degrees in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania.
Tell me a joke.
Why did the chicken cross the Mobius strip? To get to the same side. How do you talk to a giant? Use big words. I thought I spotted a leopard once. Turns out they're born like that.
What time is it in Beijing?
It's 2:24 a.m. in Beijing, China.
What time is it in California?
In Sacramento, California, it's 11:24 a.m.
How was my sleep last night?
1 hour and 54 minutes.
Yeah, the battery died. Start a run workout.
If you double press the crown, that'll show you all the recent apps you have open. And I wouldn't look into this too much. Like you can swipe them away and close them, but that's like so tedious and it takes so long to do that. So I pretty much never actually go about doing that. The bottom button, well, you can press it once to open up your kind of quick settings right there. You know, Wi-Fi, see your battery life, stuff like that. You can press and hold it to do a compass backtrack. So if you're lost and you want to go back to where you were, you can do that, or an emergency call as well, or you can power off your watch. And if you double press it, that opens up Apple Pay. And this watch, yes, does have Apple Pay. So you can go and tap if you're at the local, convenience store or whatever, and you want to buy something. So this is a voice memo test, just testing out the microphone on the Apple Watch SE 3. Let me know how this microphone sounds. If you're going to answer a phone call, it would sound something like this. Obviously, this is important for talking to Siri and, of course, voice memos like this. Now, as far as new features on here, there definitely are a number of new things with WatchOS 26, as well as the recent updates since the last Watch SE came out. We now have the Vitals app, which has a lot more information this year, and I actually really like the app. We're kind of moving away from the 3 rings model of like standing and walking as like the only health metrics, now focused a little bit more on sleeping and recovery and how much like your heart health and stuff like that. The Siri requests are now processed on device as well, and we have the raise your wrist to talk to Siri. I have mixed feelings about this. I kind of like how you don't have to, say any summoning words or press and hold the button, but it's not really that hard to do, and it saves you from accidentally, like every time you lift your wrist up, if you lift it the wrong way, it just turns on Siri, and I don't always want that. As far as features that were on the old one that are still here, it's great that you still have Find My iPhone, still have Apple Pay, car crash detection, SOS, fall detection remains among the best in the industry from the studies I read. Of course, I showed you compass backtrack. The decibel meter is something I use a lot. I really like having the warnings to protect my hearing. So if I'm in a loud environment, I know, hey, maybe you want to get out of the loud environment or get some earplugs. We've got voice memos on here, maps. The camera remote has been improving a lot with the new iOS on the phone as well. And we've got other things like breathing exercises and a ton of other apps you can get in the App Store. But breaking down the pros and the cons of the Apple Watch SE 3. Of course, this is a more budget-friendly watch, so there's some things that are great and definitely some downsides. The positives, it's the same price as the previous generation 3 years ago. I think that is really, really great, making this very affordable for a lot of people. It also has a very powerful chip. In fact, like I said, the same exact chip you're getting in the Ultra 3, which is $800. It also has one of the best operating systems in any watch. There's so many app developers that focus on Apple Watch first, and therefore have really robust apps, and you have a good variety of apps you can choose from. It's very likely the most accurate watch you can buy for this price, and on the outside, it looks the same as every other Apple Watch, so nobody's gonna know you kind of saved money on a cheaper watch. They're gonna look and say, oh, you got an Apple Watch. They're not gonna know if it's a Series 11 or an SE unless they're really looking to Apple Watches a lot. And all of that kind of make it a great price for yourself as a gift, for a child, as I mentioned before, for an elderly person so you can track fall detection. Okay, I should mention one other thing. There's the GPS only model, as they call it, which is just non-cellular model, or there's the cellular model. I think the cellular one is an extra maybe $50, and then you get like a $5 or $10 a month plan. So you don't have to get that, but keep in mind, that is gonna be a little bit more expensive if you get that model. Okay, so those are the positives. I like it, there's a lot of good things. But the negatives, there are still some pretty chunky bezels on here. So Apple kind of reserves the better display for the Series 11 and for the Ultra. Android watches at this price definitely have much better designs in my opinion, like better screen to body ratio if you're trying to really save money, but again, a lot of them don't work with iPhones. This also doesn't have an ultra wideband chip. It doesn't have ECG. I think a lot of people don't use ECG that often, but if you do need ECG and that's really important to you, don't get this watch. It also lacks dual band GPS. I mean, they pretty much all do at this price. It didn't get satellite communication on this watch, so the SOS feature we see on the Ultra, for example, as well as the other new features like hypertension detection, that doesn't come to this watch, at least not yet. We're not getting that. And with the second gen sensor, it's not likely we will be getting that anytime soon. Also, Apple Watches are kind of generally not good at detecting like when you're standing or sitting, which is why I'm glad we're moving away from that 3 rings model into the kind of Vitals app. I think that's a lot better because I'll be at my standing desk like all day standing, and my watch will like every hour say, it's time to stand up. And like I've been standing for hours. I don't know why, it just, maybe because I'm not walking around, it doesn't know I'm standing, but regardless, that's just a little bug with this one. Otherwise, I have a friend that, like I mentioned before, trained for a half Ironman, ran a half Ironman using an Apple Watch SE. These are very, very capable watches. You don't have to spend a lot of money. Of course, the battery life was kind of the only limitation there. It actually died before he finished his race, but at least for training, it definitely can get the job done. So that's the Apple Watch SE 3. This watch, I think, is really an excellent way to get the almost full Apple Watch experience, but save a ton of money on the other end. If you don't need those more niche features like hypertension detection or ECG or satellite messaging, then this is really the watch to get. If you enjoyed this video, consider liking and subscribing. I'm Mike O'Brien, and I'll see you in that comparison video between this and the Apple Watch Series 11 and the Apple Watch Ultra 3.